Hello and welcome to Indian Standard Time. I'm Siddharth Varadarajan. My guest today on this show is Sylvie Kauffmann, Editorial Director of Monde, which is France's leading newspaper. You were also until 2011 Editor-in-Chief of the Monde and in fact the first ever female editor of that great newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us on Indian Standard Time today.
Thank you.
Sylvie Kauffmann, what I want to talk about with you today in the time that we have is the media scene in France, because Le Monde is the most important paper. You have unique insights into how the media is coping with changes of technology, which is an issue that is of great interest in India. And then of course we will discuss French politics and French foreign policy. But let's start with the media scene. We know that in the US and the UK, newspaper subscriptions have been falling. There's a great crisis of profitability for newspapers because of the internet. Is the case in France?
Absolutely, yes. We have been through a revolution, properly speaking. I mean, our business model collapsed completely, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago probably, and we had to undergo a complete transformation. You know, of course, we started a website like everybody else, but as we were getting ready to digitalize our content, then the mobile phone arrived, and so we turned the ship around to adjust to the mobile phone generation. But then the tablets arrived, and you know, it's been a constant game of, I was going to say cat and mouse, almost. You know, we had to, we are condemned to innovate permanently, and while sticking to our values and traditions. So it's really a very difficult game that we are playing, but at the same time, it's of course, because it's so challenging, it's very exciting. I think the newsroom, after a tough start, has done a fantastic job of adjusting to all these challenges and innovations. So I would say now the main challenge is both a business one, which I leave to my my colleagues in charge of the business aspect. They have a hard time, but we, you know, like, of course, we innovate on digital, on the digital side, but we also diversify our activities, like we organize conferences, and you've been kind enough to take part in one recently in Paris, and we also produce more and more content and more varied content, you know, video content, not only written content. And on the editorial side, the challenge is to, as I said, stick to our values in this very complex media environment and very fast-paced environment. That's also a big challenge for us. We're still an evening newspaper. We still put out a print newspaper every evening, whose circulation, as you pointed out, is falling down, but still we have a very faithful readership who wants to buy the newspaper.
What's the circulation now?
Oh, now it's about 300,000, and it, you know, I think it was close to 500,000 at some stage, yeah.
And who would be
which is very little by Indian standards, well, I know.
In India, we have the luxury of not only much larger numbers, but print circulation actually keeps on increasing.
Exactly, yes.
And we don't know how long that will last, but we're enjoying it while it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
But tell me, who's your main competition in terms of print circulation in France? And how much do they sell?
I think I would say it's Le Figaro. Le Figaro is a very good quality newspaper, but it's more politically oriented. It's considered as the quality paper on the right wing. And I think its circulation is more or less comparable to ours. Then you have a very good business newspaper, which is Les Echos. Interestingly enough, and sadly, Libération, which is the main paper on the right, on the left. I'm sorry, on the left, has been doing very poorly and has suffered much more than we have. Right. And it's been bought recently. And there's been a big activity on the ownership side of media, not only of newspapers, but also, media groups. And that's another...
Le Monde has also gone through some changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were bought 5 years ago by, almost 5 years, yes, 5 years ago now, by a consortium of 3 big businessmen. But I think we're really satisfied that we are, and I'm not only saying it because it's my newspaper, but our independence has been really upheld, and we have no worries about this, about our editorial independence. It's more of a problem for other media groups because they all belong now to big industrial or commercial groups. Some of them involved with have public contracts, depending on public contracts. So I'm satisfied that we still have a very, very free press and media in France, and we are very lucky for this because it's not the case all over the world. But still, we have to be vigilant.
As technology evolves, it's not difficult for journalists to learn new ways of telling a story. Earlier, we would write. Now, it's not uncommon in India, at least, to see a journalist who writes also, for example, carrying a smartphone where she takes a video. Yeah. So I think journalists have been quite quick to adapt. Yes. The problem is on the business side, and as readers migrate to the internet, where advertising revenues are much less than what they might be, what they are in print, there's been a tendency to cut costs.
Yes.
And the first victim around the world of this drive to reduce costs has been foreign coverage. Le Monde was one of those papers that had a great network of foreign correspondents. Has that changed in recent years?
When I was the editor when the paper was bought, and that was my first request to the new owners. Please, Le Monde, in French, Le Monde means the world in English. Le Monde is Le Monde. That's our DNA. Our foreign coverage is, and I know you're going to cut costs because you're a good businessman, but please respect our foreign coverage and our network of foreign correspondents. And I must say, to their credit, they understood that. They understood that if they cut the foreign coverage, Le Monde wouldn't be Le Monde anymore. We would lose our identity, and that was our strong point. So, of course, they've been cutting costs in our foreign coverage. I think foreign correspondents maybe live less well off than
and maybe they can't travel. Maybe they can't travel as often. Huh?
I mean, they do travel, but maybe they have less ground houses, or but they don't complain. They are still very happy to be foreign correspondents, and I think we have saved really our foreign.
So at present, what would be the rough number of correspondents that Le Monde has around the world?
I think we have about 30 or something like this. Yeah, we still have in all big countries, and in the European Union also, because there's been a tendency also within the European Union to concentrate the coverage, and we still have correspondents in each major country, and so no, I think we have like 4 in the US, and it's good.
Well, that's at least I would say 6 or 7 times more than any Indian media house.
Really?
I think the maximum that anybody
has
here
a big country
is about 7 or 8. But I think proprietors don't want to spend money on foreign coverage.
Yeah.
French media hit the headlines around the world with the terrorist attack on Charlie Hebdo. Now, Charlie Hebdo is not conventional media; it's a satirical magazine, but it is an issue which is very close to the hearts of people in France.
Yeah.
How do you, how has the Charlie Hebdo attack changed? Do you as a reader of Charlie Hebdo see that the pressure has somehow got to them, or are people being more cautious now in what they write?
Yeah, Charlie Hebdo is undergoing its own trouble transformation, but that's normal. I mean, you have 12 journalists or cartoonists killed in a terrorist attack during the editorial conference. You can't stay unscathed after this. It's so some of the survivors have left the newsroom because it's just too much pressure on them to try to put out a new magazine and so on. So that's the special case of Charlie Hebdo. On the whole, yes, it has left scars. I would say not so much the attack itself as the aftermath. As important as the attack probably was the demonstration, the rally we had on January 11. You know, when around 4 million people all over France rallied and, you know, in defiance of terrorism and said, we want to uphold, to defend our freedom of creation, of drawing, of, you know, our intellectual freedom and freedom of the press. And that was an extraordinary event. I mean, I was there, I just couldn't believe it, what I saw. But then what happened afterwards was almost as shocking, if you want. We realized that, in fact, those 4 million people didn't represent the whole of France, that a lot of people stayed away. You know, we had this big slogan, Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie. And then a few days later, we realized a lot of people in France thought, Je ne suis pas Charlie, I am not Charlie, and disagreed with this. And so we started to
They were disagreeing with the kind of satire?
Yes, they thought it was offensive, and that what we cherish most in France about our freedom, our liberty, which is to criticize all religions, because Charlie Hebdo did criticize, I mean, did make fun of Islam, but also of Catholicism, of, you know, of Catholic priests. They were really, and they still are, extremely tough on the Catholic religion and the priests, and, or, you know, or Jews or Protestants, and that for us was really a huge value. And in fact, many people, mostly Muslims, thought, you know, religion cannot be handled this way. Religion cannot be made fun of. We had this, of course, with Salman Rushdie. We've seen that before, but in France, that was really the first, you know, strike on this. And so I thought we would have a huge national conversation and debate about this, but we have retreated, I think, because, you know, it's too explosive.
But it seems to me possible that you could take a view, as many in India did, that the cartoons are offensive, but Charlie Hebdo had the right to publish them, and that the terrorists who attacked, or anybody who attacks, has no business to do that.
Yeah, but you see there's a new trend since Charlie Hebdo, because we went back in my paper, for instance, to the 70s and looked at the cartoons that Charlie Hebdo published in the 70s. It was much more offensive than now. It was really incredible.
And offensive against
religions,
okay.
You know, Jesus Christ, the Pope, you know, you name it.
And Islam too, huh?
Islam, of course, and, you know...
so there's something about the current times
Jewish... So I think the tolerance level has gone down, and, you know, that's the big question. Do we have to acknowledge it and take it into account? Tolerance has gone down. Fundamentalism is on the rise. We have terrorist attacks everywhere. You know, so I think a lot of people, even without saying it, accept the fact that we have to be a little bit less daring now. Yes, that's a fact.
In the eyes of the world, even as we were called upon, and we all, a vast majority of people identified with Je suis Charlie, and the idea of France as a country that should have freedom and tolerance of each other and so on. There is also a growing perception today that France is moving to the right politically, and that French politics in some ways may be becoming more intolerant of difference. We've seen the alarming rise, alarming at least in India, and I'm sure to many in Europe, of Marine Le Pen as a serious candidate, something that her father was never able to accomplish. And we've seen in response to that, Nicolas Sarkozy, who was the president earlier, rebranding his own politics and moving it to the right. worried are you by this rightward shift in French politics?
It's a fact, you're right. Marine Le Pen, her party, the National Front, scores between 20 and 25% of the votes, according to...
So she's the front runner now, right?
No,
for
well, yes, there was one poll which gave her as a front runner. I don't believe she can be elected. I mean, I know some people are
so she may be the
seeing
first
it
round
as a
leader,
threat,
but
but yeah, she will go in the second round of
get
presidential election. But I mean, you know, come back to me if I'm wrong. But you know, I
we
really,
have 2 years.
yeah, I think I don't see it as a real possibility. But she's a fighter. She's talented. She's very dangerous,
right.
And. You know, the economic situation, we have a 10% unemployment rate, so that also feeds. I'm sure if the unemployment rate was lower, that would affect her polls also, her results, definitely. So, you know, this is not a permanent feature. It's very much linked to our economic situation, but it's there. And you're right, Nicolas Sarkozy's party, Nicolas Sarkozy himself personally has been trying to fight her by going her way a little bit. But this is very controversial, and that's where the hope is, that including in his party, you know, they're going to have a primary election in this party before the presidential election, and two of the main contenders or the main rivals of Nicolas Sarkozy, Alain Juppé and François Fillon, are very hard on Marine Le Pen. They are taking the opposite strategy. They want to fight her. So, and of course the Socialist Party, President Hollande's party, is also openly fighting this. So we have a fight, which is great.
The topic of controversy in Paris the day I left yesterday was the statement by one of Sarkozy's former ministers, Nadine Morano, where she made the statement on TV that she was extremely worried at the prospect of France becoming what she called a Muslim country. She said France is a country of the Judeo-Christian race. And I was struck by the irony of this, that here is an ex-minister of a government that when it was in power insisted that France was secular, to the extent to which it banned the wearing of hijabs in public and so on and so forth. And now the same person from the same government is saying, well, hang on a minute, France is a Judeo-Christian country. So what happened to say, is race trumping secularism?
Yeah, well, secularism is a very, very old tradition in France. There's a law from 1905, you know, on separation of church and state. And so it's a very ingrained value in French politics and in French society. Now we have the rise of Islam, and so most Muslims. I mean, I don't know if I could say most Muslim, but some Muslims in France don't accept secularism because that's the way they want to live their religion.
Right.
But so that gives ground to people like Nadine Morano, whose views are well known to be a bit extremist. To say, you know, we are overcome. I mean, they're not even 10% of the population. You know, I mean, it is true that Islam has become the second religion of France because Catholic religion is the first one, and then we have minorities, Protestant and Jews, and Jewish minority, but and they're not, you know, but it's still under 10%, probably. We don't know exactly because we don't do ethnic statistics or religious statistics, but you know, we know with mosques and so on. I think this is just putting fire on the debate. I don't think it's contributing positively to the debate, but it is true that we have also, you know, with the crisis of migrants and refugees, we are having this discussion, you know, how bigger Islam can be in France without affecting our culture. I think we're really far from the so-called invasion. You know, it's not. You know, you've been in France recently, and you don't have this impression, I suppose. Yeah.
Now, linked to this debate on the role of Islam in France is, of course, the international debate on the growing threat posed by ISIS, which in geopolitical terms, at least today, appears as one of the most significant threats in the wider West Asia, North Africa region, what you call the Middle East. France was one of those countries that took the lead in pushing for regime change in Syria. In the eyes of many people in the world, including in India, but certainly we've heard the Russian president say recently, that if you want regime change in Syria, then you are acting in favor of ISIS. And we saw President Hollande push back a little bit on this logic. But does it worry you in France as an analyst that somewhere down the line, if France is helping topple Assad, you are de facto helping ISIS?
I wouldn't say France has been pushing for regime change in Syria. I think France has been saying that Assad couldn't stay in power. I know, it's subtle, but it's. Right. I don't think France wants to be seen as organizing regime change, right, because we've had this disastrous Iraqi experience, which Libya. Again, Libya was not to organize regime change. Libya was to prevent massacres in Benghazi, right? And then it led to regime change, but so Vladimir Putin will see it differently, but I think from a European point of view, that was not the objective. Now, France has said all along, the French government has said all along that after supporting Bashar al-Assad in the beginning, when the revolution started, which began as a democratic revolution also in Syria, French shifted and said, okay, Bashar al-Assad cannot be supported anymore, he has to go. I think at the beginning, 2011, 2012, there was the belief that he was going to fall by himself. I mean, that people would overthrow him and that, he would go like Mubarak and Ben Ali did. And then came the realization that he was not going, that he was supported by, lots of forces, and that was not so easy. I think now we're having another shift, which means that, okay, we can accept that he will be part of a settlement, but in the end, he has to go. I mean, he can be part of a transitional settlement, he can be part of a negotiation, but he cannot be part of the long-term settlement. Ultimately, he's the butcher of Syria, he's killed so many of his own people, and he has to go. So I think that's more in line with the European and probably American position. That's, of course, very different from the Russian position.
Right. But the Russians seem to be saying now that the international community must back Assad at least as an interim measure, and that if we don't do that, then we are helping ISIS.
It's very tricky.
France doesn't accept that logic.
It's very tricky, and for France, it's true that France was more hawkish than other governments on Syria, but and it just started airstrikes a couple of days ago. But, at the same time, I don't think anybody has a clue on Syria, and that's really the disaster. It's a terrible conflict. It's affecting us directly. I mean, of course, it's, half of the population of Syria has fled, has been displaced either inside or outside the country. It is a major disaster. We saw it coming. I remember we wrote editorials and, stories, headlines about this crisis is coming, and nobody could do anything or dare to do anything. And so now we have this, we have terrorism in our countries, we have this mass of refugees coming to Europe, and we don't know what to do. So it's tragic.
On that somber note, Sylvie Kauffmann, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, my pleasure. Thank you.
That wraps it up for this episode of IST. Do join us again next week with another guest. Thank you for watching.